All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being patient there while we dealt with some technical difficulties in the back end here. We'll go ahead and get started today. Today we are talking about Nebula. This is our sort of monthly introduction to Nebula. So we're going to spend today just going over sort of a brief overview of Nebula, what it is, how it works, how much it costs you, etc. So what is Nebula? So Nebula is the first full stack cloud networking solution for SMB. So what does that mean? Basically, starting a number of years back, we saw a move to doing cloud-based management of networking. Right up until that point, if you wanted to manage your networks, you logged in directly to the device itself, either through a command line or a web GUI to do configuration. As we started adding access points, getting a lot of access points on the network, we introduced, wireless LAN controllers to make it so you don't have to log into each of your dozens or hundreds of access points one at a time. But it was still a lot of work. Maybe you were using SNMP, maybe you're buying some expensive software out there that does SNMP management and monitoring, or software that downloads logs and parses them for you. And it's just a lot of effort, a lot of work went into managing your customers' networks, getting remote access to the customer's site, or having to go on site to make changes. So there was this move to the cloud. It started with Meraki, which got bought out by Cisco. And we saw what Meraki was doing and said, hey, you know what? That is really nice technology. That would be something that would be good at the SMB. So Meraki and some of the other early pioneers in this space were primarily targeting the enterprise market, large enterprise customers. And we thought, this would be something that would work more for the SMB as well. I mean, right? If simplifying things and making things easier is good for enterprise, it's good for everybody. So we launched Nebula all the way back in 2016. So Nebula is the name of our cloud management solution. It covers security, switches, wireless LANs. We got lots of products now that can be managed through the Nebula Cloud. It's a 61 on the slide. I'm not sure what the actual number is at this point, but it's more than that now. So let's talk a little bit about the components here. So this is Nebula. So Nebula primarily is going to be this here, what we call Nebula Control Center. This is the cloud-hosted portion of Nebula. It is hosted at Amazon AWS for reliability, dependability, and security. And this is where you do all of your management of all of your customers, all of their networks, all of your Zyxel networking devices. So that's going to be your primary interface with Nebula. Now our hardware works with Nebula, so we have security gateways, firewalls, access points, switches, all can be managed through this Nebula cloud. And we have our Nebula mobile application. So the mobile application is primarily for installers out there. And it's a tool that you can use to get a quick eye what's going on your customers' networks. You can make some simple changes to the networks, but it doesn't provide full feature management, but it makes it really easy for installers to be able to add and remove devices to customers' networks when they're out in the field. So this is what typically goes into deploying a customer network, right? You got to purchase the equipment, install it, figure out how you're going to monitor it, figure out your remote access, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea behind Nebula is to remove many of these steps from you. And where we can't remove the steps, make them easier or make it so you have to buy less equipment. So what does Nebula do for you? It gets you up and running in minutes. With just a few minutes, including creating your Nebula account for the first time, you can set up an access point, have it broadcasting an encrypted SSID and a second guest SSID with captive portal. Just take a couple minutes to do. So we put a lot of time and effort into the Nebula interface to make it easy to use, and we've added various tools and wizards and default settings to get you up and running really quickly. So one of the cool things you can do here with Nebula is you can start configuring your customer's network before you've even received or selected the hardware. You can simply log into the Nebula interface at any time, start adding your customers, start laying out their sites, and many of the network settings can be configured ahead of time before you've even assigned any hardware to that customer. Once you've figured out what hardware you need and you've received it, there's a QR code on the outside of the box. You simply need to scan that QR code using our mobile app. and assign the device to your customer and their network. And that's basically all you need to do to configure most of our Nebula equipment. Security firewalls have a couple extra steps because they're security firewalls, and our GS1350 series switches, you have to enable Nebula ahead of time, but all other products, it's just as simple as scanning the QR code, assigning them to the customer. Once that device gets plugged in and has power and an internet connection, it will reach out to the cloud, see that it's been assigned to a customer in site, and will automatically update its firmware and download the configuration for that site that's been assigned to it. So you don't need to necessarily even take the equipment out of the box until it's at the customer's location. There's no configuration that needs to be done on these devices directly. Everything is done through the cloud. So in order to use Nebula, you need nothing really. The agent that communicates with the cloud is built into all of our Nebula compatible hardware. So there's no configuration you need to do there. There is no additional hardware you need. There's no cloud keys. There's no CNA devices that act as coordinators. There's no additional software, so no software that needs to be installed on your computer. There's no servers that need to be set up or virtual machines or anything like that. Everything is either hosted directly in the hardware itself or is accessed through the cloud via a web browser. So anywhere you've got access to internet and a web browser, you have access to your customers and their networks. So some of the features here that are part of Nebula is we have really easy to set up and use guest access, whether we're talking about providing access to visitors at a company, salespeople, customers coming in, or whether we're talking about doing something a little bit more full feature like a small hotel or a cafe. Nebula has the ability to do guest access. This is something that's built in just on our access points, so you can do guest access with Captive Portal on APs without needing to do anything special as far as replacing any existing switches or gateways. We do also offer gateway-hosted Captive Portal as well via our security appliances. So guest access gives you a captive portal. You can modify that captive portal through the Nebula interface. We allow you to change some of the settings there through the web interface. If you're looking for more control and more in-depth editing of what the customer sees when they get sent to that captive portal, we do give you the ability to download the HTML and CSS files, edit them to your heart's content, and then you can host them on your own server or upload them back to the cloud. If you need even more functionality, we give you code that you could add to your own website so it can interface with the captive portal. We give you a lot of flexibility on the types of captive portal here. We can have people simply agree to a terms of service to get online. We can have them log in with a username and password. We can require them to register an email address. We can use Facebook for them to log in, et cetera. So a lot of flexibility when it comes to the captive portal functionality. On the access point side, you've got access to all those standard features you would expect: WPA2, WPA3 enterprise security, all the industry standards that are focused on making roaming quick and fast. And we do offer our smart mesh technology. So the smart mesh allows you to provide, internet connectivity via a wireless backlink to some APs if you can't get a physical cable to them. It also gives us the flexibility here for an AP. If for some reason it gets disconnected from the hardwired network, it can automatically flip itself into mesh mode, find another AP that still has a working connection, and create a link to that for you. So on the switch side of things, we've got our intelligent PoE. You've probably heard about this already, but it's the ability for us to basically monitor the actual PoE draw of connected devices and free up additional budget for other devices. So you can fit more devices on the same switch with the same PoE budget than you could without our intelligent PoE technology. We offer the types of network security you expect on switches, the ability to do 802.1x authentication, loop guard, DHCP server guard, et cetera. And virtual switch stacking. So when you go into the Nebula interface, you can configure ports across multiple switches simultaneously. So all updates are going to be done over the air. You simply log into the Nebula website, pull up your customer, and you do your configurations there. There's no need to set up port forwards, no need to make a VPN into your customer's site. And this includes firmware updates, which you can schedule as to when those get applied through the Nebula interface. On the security side of things, we make setting up site-to-site VPNs very easy. You simply choose the site you want to network together, choose the topology you want from a pull-down list, and we take care of everything else to make those site-to-site VPNs work. On the mobile user side of things, we have a couple different technologies. We have our secure Wi-Fi, which turns an access point into a plug-and-play VPN appliance that employees can take home, plug into their home network, and be able to get access to the corporate network over VPN simply by connecting to a SSID, which has two-factor authentication and 802.1x authentication, to make sure only those who need to get on to get onto that VPN link. We also have the ability to send out an email script that can configure the built-in VPN clients in Windows, iOS devices, and so it's Windows, Mac, and iOS devices. Unfortunately, does not work with Android. There's just too much variability in Android devices to make it work. So Nebula is designed from the ground up as a platform to manage all of your customers and all of your sites. So everything's been designed with the idea that you're going to have a lot of customers. They may have a lot of sites, and to make it really easy for you to get to the customer or the site you want to manage. So when you log in, this is sort of what you see here. This is a list here. You choose your customer and you get taken to this site here. This shows all of the sites that that customer of yours has and gives you a quick snapshot of what's going on. As you can see, we also have Google Maps integration. So we have the ability there so you to get a visual representation of where your customers' sites are. Give me just a second here. Once you drill down to one of those customer sites, it takes you to this dashboard here. So this dashboard, all of these widgets are customizable, and they give you a quick view of what's going on your customer's network. How many wireless users may be on there, how much PoE is being used versus your PoE budget. If you're using one of the Nebula controlled security gateways, you can see things here which include, which applications are using the most bandwidth, which users are using the most bandwidth, any sort of security things that have been blocked, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all customizable, so you just see what you want to see. On the left-hand side is where you can delve down into individual types of products. So if you want to check the logs for your switches or your access points, you'd go here. If you want to configure them, same thing, go here and choose the configuration option. And then up here at the top of the screen, we've got pull-down menus. One pull-down menu is a list of all of your customers. And then once you've chosen a customer, the second pull-down window has all of the sites, making it really quick to jump from one customer or one site to another. So this is just showing you here sort of a status screen on our wireless side of things. Again, the columns that you see here, these are all customizable, so you can just display those columns that you want to see. But it's showing us stuff here like, is this user currently online, or is this a user that was online earlier and is disconnected? Lets us know which SSID they were connected to, their MAC address, their IP address, the channel they were using, if they're currently connected, the signal strength, what type of security is on there, et cetera, et cetera. We also up here can chart usage of that access point over time. So if you've got a user complaining about things, you can look back here and say, oh, look at that. The user was having these issues. The access points were overloaded. We had a lot of users on there. On the switch side of things, it's a very similar thing. You've got the ability here to see utilization of bandwidth over time as a graph. And then up here, you've got a view of all of your switches and their ports. And these ports are color coded here so you can see which ports have something plugged in, whether that device is a gigabit port or it's a 10100 device that's been plugged in, whether that port is currently providing PoE or not. So a quick, easy way to get a snapshot of what's going on there on your switch. When it comes to port configuration, you simply select the ports you want to configure. And again, you can do this across multiple switches simultaneously. And then we give you a nice, simple, clean interface here for most of your common settings that you may want to change, such as some of your VPN settings, things like that, whether PoE is enabled or not. So Nebula itself and everything I've been talking about up to this point is absolutely free. So this is something that sets us apart from a lot of our competition. Everybody's offering some sort of cloud solution these days. So not only have we been doing it longer than most of our competition, we're doing it cheaper. It's free. There is no limit to the number of devices you can manage in Nebula. There's no limit to the number of customers you can manage in the free version of Nebula. Now, we do offer upgrades and optional licenses, which unlock some additional features, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but those are primarily features that are aimed at the MSP space. So when we first started doing Nebula back in the day, we followed the Cisco Meraki model, where you had essentially the same hardware, but one line could only be cloud managed, one line can only be managed the traditional way. So we've gotten around that now, and almost everything we sell falls under what we would call Nebula Flex. So what Nebula Flex means is that these access points or these switches or whatever, they have dual functionality. They can be managed in the cloud, or they can be managed the traditional way. So that way you can standardize on one set of hardware and use that same hardware whether your customer is being cloud managed or traditionally managed. And so with Nebula Flex, it's really easy to switch modes. If you want a device to be managed in the cloud, you simply log into Nebula, scan that QR code, and assign it to the Nebula cloud. You assign it to your customer and to a site. The device within a few minutes will automatically detect that, or will detect it automatically when you first power it on, and automatically put itself into Nebula mode for you. Now, if at any point you decide you no longer want to use Nebula Cloud Management for it, you simply go into the Nebula interface, remove it from the Nebula interface, and the device will automatically reboot and put itself into traditionally managed mode. Now, one key thing here, which causes sometimes some confusion here, is the configurations are independent between the two modes. So when you switch from one mode to the other, you are going to need to then configure the device. It's not going to convert the configuration from standalone into cloud or from cloud back into standalone. It'll just, when it switches modes, it'll just default back into the default settings. Now you will see some products labeled as Nebula Flex Pro. So what Nebula Flex Pro means for the most part is this device comes bundled with 1 year of our Nebula Pro Pack, which is an optional license which unlocks some additional features. So if you see a device labeled Nebula Flex Pro, you know you're getting that 1 year license bundled with it. Now on the APs, there's one extra thing that Pro gets you. When you buy a Pro AP, you've got standalone mode, you've got the cloud mode, but it also means that device can be managed with one of our local area controllers, which are built into our security appliances. So if you're not looking to use Nebula, but you'd like to use a local controller to manage wireless APs, you still want to buy a Nebula Flex Pro device because those are the only devices that can be managed with a controller. So this is just a sort of a rundown here of the different devices we have here and which are Nebula Flex and which are Nebula Flex Pro. So you can see here on our APs, it's our lower end models are Nebula Flex, the NWA 50 and 90, the 110, 210 series, and the 1123 series. On the switches, it's our GS 1920 V2 series and the 1930 series. And then on the security gateways, it's our USG Flex devices, which do not come with a bundled UTM license with them. Those devices, which are Nebula Flex Pro, are our higher end APs. So those would be our APs that start with the number 5 or 6 and have at least 3 numerals in the name. So the WAX 510D, the WAC 500, etc. On the switch side of things, it's the GS 1350, the GS 2220 series, and the XS or XGS 2220 series, and the 3800s. And then our security gateways, it's the USG Flex series that comes bundled with UTM services, also will include 1 year of Pro Pack, and our ATP series Nebula management is included as part of the gold bundle or the gold license, which comes with the device when you buy it. So let's talk a little bit more about licensing. So again, the core version here of Nebula is free. It gives you access to all of the core features of your devices, lets you manage an unlimited number of customers and devices. Then we've got our Plus Pack and our Pro Pack. So Pro Pack is something we've had since 2016 at the very beginning. And this unlocks a lot of additional features, which we'll talk about here in a couple slides. The Plus Pack is something we launched only a couple years ago, and it was designed to give us something that competes more with that mid-tier cloud managed solutions like from Netgear or somebody like that. So it's a little bit less powerful, but it's a lot cheaper than the Pro Pack is. So one key thing here when it comes to licensing is in order to unlock the features of Plus or Pro Pack, every device in the organization needs to have a license assigned to it, an active valid license at that tier level. So an organization is just your customer. Generally, when you go into the Nebula interface, you create different accounts for your customers. We call those organizations. So if you've got a customer that wants to use ProPack and they've got 20 devices, you will need to make sure each of those 20 devices has a license assigned to it. Once they all have licenses assigned to them, Nebula interface will unlock those additional ProPack features. If a device license expires, you'll be given a 15-day grace period to add the license back in there, so all your devices have that Pro license. However, if you don't do that after that 15-day grace period, your entire organization will drop back to the free version of Nebula until you correct and add those licenses to it. So let's talk about some of the differences here between the different levels of Nebula. So all of them give you unlimited, registration and management of your customers. All of them have the zero-touch deployment where you simply plug in the device, and if you've assigned it to the cloud, it will automatically connect to the cloud, put itself in cloud mode, and download its configuration. All of them provide over-the-air management. All of them provide access to our mobile device applications. All of them give you central device management and give you client monitoring and reporting. But how much log information we keep in the cloud changes between the different versions. The free version of Nebula only keeps 24 hours of log information in the cloud. We still do support syslog, so you can always set up your own syslog server and have it export logs to your syslog server. This 24 hours is just for what we're hosting in our cloud here for you. If you upgrade your organization to the Plus Pack, you get 7 days of logs kept in the cloud, and then Pro Pack keeps a year's worth of logs in the cloud. Another area where they have some differences here is when it comes to the number of admin accounts each organization or each of your customers is allowed to have. So the base pack gives you 5 separate admin accounts per organization. Plus Pack gives you 8. Pro Pack gives you an unlimited number. We also host our own cloud authentication server. So this can be used for MAC filtering. This can be used for 802.1x authentication. This can be used for DPPSK. Free version of Nebula only gives you 50 entries into that database. Plus Pack gives you 100 entries into that database. And then Pro Pack gives you an unlimited number of entries into that database. All version of Nebula give you the ability to schedule networking functions based on time, such as turning off SSIDs at certain days or times. All of them give you access to MAC filtering and 802.1x authentication. All of them give you access to captive portal. And then when we start seeing some differences here, these are things that are only going to be in the Plus or the Pro Pack. Advanced firmware scheduling. So the core cheap free version of Nebula gives you firmware scheduling. Plus and Pro Pack gives you advanced scheduling. It allows you to make rules based on the type of device or to create rules for each individual device as to when firmware updates are going to be pushed out. We give you with Plus and Pro Pack advanced reporting, so you can generate various different reports, have them automatically emailed out at certain intervals to you or your customer. And we give you the ability for you to add your logo to those emails. So for instance, if you're doing, security stuff on there, maybe you want to let them see what the content filtering is blocking. That's the type of thing that would be included with these type of reports. We give you an automatic network topology view. It's a visual way of seeing what is plugged into what on your network. And I'll show you what that looks like here, I think, in a couple slides. The ability to get email alerts and push alerts on the mobile app, such as when a device goes offline for a certain period of time. Those are part of the Plus and Pro Pack. And then the ability to use what are called Wi-Fi vouchers, which is sort of a way of doing paid Wi-Fi access. That requires the Plus or the Pro Pack. And then the Pro Pack unlocks some additional features here that aren't available in the free or the Plus version. And that includes things like the ability to create an organization-wide configuration template and the ability to clone or sync sites together. We keep audit logs in the clouds for you. So in addition to the regular logs, we have audit logs. So you can see who's been making changes and what those changes were. We give you access to advanced Wi-Fi AAA features for those of you that are doing more of a commercial type of captive portal scenario. the ability to open a ticket directly with our headquarters through the Nebula interface rather than calling our local tech support here in Anaheim. Advanced features in the Wi-Fi settings, advanced reports for the Wi-Fi settings, AI, switch, IPTV AI features, stuff like that. So that's the type of stuff here. So Arnell sent in a question asking, can devices be managed both cloud and standalone? So yeah, anything that's Nebula Flex can be used in either mode, but the modes are exclusive from each other. So if you're managing it in the cloud, you manage it in the cloud. If you've decided to manage it standalone, you will always need to manage it standalone. There is no synchronization between those two modes. So settings don't carry over between them. Another question here is, does cloud management for routers have the same configuration items as the standalone management? So no, it does not. So the idea behind Nebula on the cloud is to simplify things, make things easier to do. And so because of that, some of the settings are going to be different. Some of the more advanced things, particularly on the firewall, some of the more advanced policy rules and things like that are going to be missing from the Nebula interface. It is very common for us to have customers who use Nebula to manage their switches and access points, but still continue to manage the gateway in standalone mode because they are using those more advanced features. So we'll show some screenshots here of some of these ProPack features. So this is the access point view here, and this is using our intelligence. So we've got machine learning or artificial intelligence, whatever you want to call it. We monitor what's going on the network, and we take a look at these users that are having issues or having poor connection quality, and we try to figure out what's causing it. And then we can automatically change some of your Wi-Fi settings to try to improve the experience for those marginal users. We have something similar here on the IPTV side of things. So if you're providing IPTV to your customers through our switches, we have this IPTV mode. So it unlocks some advanced IGMP features for you, but it also, just like with the APs, we monitor those channels and those streams. And if we see some problems, we can alert you and say, here's the problems we're seeing. Here's what we suggest you change to solve that. So things like, frames being dropped, things like that. Here's our automatic topology view. Again, we'll go through and automatically map out which devices are connected to which other devices to, again, help you when it comes to troubleshooting. When it's been 6 months since you've deployed that network, you don't remember what's connected to what. Quick, easy way to see what's going on. Now, what I talked about before were device licenses, that Plus and ProPack. We do have another type of license, which is the MSP license. So this is a license you would buy and assign it to an admin account. So this is a per admin account license. So any admin account that has this license assigned to it is going to get some of these extra features I'm talking about here. So when you log in, you get a view similar to what we saw earlier with the free version of Nebula. When you click on your customer, you've got a list of all their sites. This is a similar view, but this is all of your customers. So here's all of your customers, and it gives you a quick rundown of what's going on their networks, how many sites they have, if they have any devices that are currently offline, if they're using the free or paid version of Nebula, and if they're using the paid version of Nebula, if it's recently expired. So it's a quick snapshot way to see what's going on your customer networks. The MSP license also unlocks some additional features. So one of the cool features it unlocks for you here is it will give you email alerts for all of your sites or all of your organizations, even the free ones. So if if the only feature that's missing from the free version of Nebula for you is those email alerts, just buy the MSP pack and you will get those for all of your sites. That may be a cheaper way to do that. The idea, though, behind this MSP license, as the name implies, is it's for managed service providers, some of which are quite large. So we're giving you extra tools here to make it easier to manage your admin teams by creating teams, grouping different admins together so you can add and remove access to various customers or sites across multiple admins at the same time, and the ability to synchronize settings between different organizations or different customers. So we also have another type of license here. So like, our security devices will all have UTM licenses that are optional that unlock additional UTM features, antivirus hosted on the gateway, content filtering, things like that. We also have such a license for our access points called Connect and Protect, or just CNP. And so what this is this is the ability for you to add UTM-like security just to specific access points on your network. So why would you want to do that? One of the things we run across here a lot of times is, you as the VAR MSP will go to the customer site. Their router is provided by the ISP. The user doesn't want to replace it or can't replace it. It's missing some of those security features, or they're very expensive. It's an expensive router with expensive UTM services. So this is just a cheap way to be able to provide similar services to certain areas. So it's very common, for instance, where you may want to use this, say, if you're providing hotspot public access areas, you may want to provide this level of security just in those public areas, but you don't need it for your employee network or for the warehouse or whatever happens to be. So Connect and Protect works. Unlike our UTM services on the gateways, which do deep packet inspection and SSL inspection and things like that, Connect and Protect works using an IP reputation filter. So basically, it looks at the website where the data you are either trying to access or where the data is coming from, and it compares it to a database we have of IPs based on what they're used for. So we will then block traffic based on that. So you can see here the categories. We can block sources of spam. We can block network scanners. We can block botnets, phishing IP addresses, proxy networks, all sorts of things like that. So that's done there. And again, it's on a per AP basis. So unlike the Pro and Plus pack where every device needs the license, with the CNP license, it unlocks these features for those APs that have the license. Those APs that don't have the license continue to function just as they did before. So there's two versions here. There's CNP and CNP Plus. CNP is for our lower end models, the NWA 1123 ACV3, the WAC 500, and the WAC 500H. And then we also have that CNP Plus license. And that, in addition to doing the IP reputation filter, allows us to do bandwidth throttling on an application basis. So you can bandwidth throttle certain applications. So, you may want to bandwidth throttle YouTube. So the maximum bandwidth is only a 480p stream. So you don't have people using up your corporate bandwidth for 4K streams, for instance. So that works in our sort of more higher end models here, basically our Wi-Fi 6 and up models, the 110AX, the 210AX, the 510, 610D, the WAX 630S, and the 650S. So if this is interesting for you, you want to play with this, we do have a live demo. You can simply go to our Nebula website, nebula.zyxel.com. And instead of logging in, there will be a button there that'll take you into a live demo so you can play around with the interface and look at it. If you are one of our channel partners and part of our partner program, you can reach out to your salesperson and they can get you a 60-day demo of actual hardware that you can take and place into your lab to test it out. And with that, guys, that's the end of today's webinar. So just to let you know here, we do have a YouTube channel. Now, Zyxel is a very large multinational company. So there's lots of different Zyxel channels on YouTube. The one here for North America is called Zyxel America channel. Most of our webinars are recorded and then uploaded to that. So if you had to step away from one of our webinars, or that we did a webinar that you wanted to see, but you just couldn't get to it in time, you can always find it within a day or two uploaded to our YouTube channel. And that has archives going back. So you can find previous versions of today's webinar. Today's webinar itself will be up there in a few days. But that's also where we have other stuff such as video case studies, success stories. It's also where we have some more detailed technical type presentations showing you how to configure things or how certain Zyxel products work. You can also find us and connect with us on LinkedIn. We are Zyxel US channel. So if you guys have any questions at this point that haven't been answered, you can send them in with the question and answer box there. That's part of the Zoom interface, and I will do my best to answer them. We have one question here from Arnell. So Arnell is asking about tutorials on managing different devices in Nebula. So yeah, if you go to that Zyxel US channel, I think you'll find some on there. Marcus is our sales engineer, and Marcus puts on more in-depth trainings, I think every other Tuesday or approximately. And he's in the process right now of uploading some more detailed stuff that will be kept on our YouTube channel to be viewed at any time. So yeah, you can find some more in-depth stuff. If you're having a hard time finding what you're looking for, or maybe we haven't covered what you're wanting to look at, reach out to your salesperson, Jacob, Andy, or David. And they can either help you find it, or they can maybe schedule and put something together for you with our sales engineer that covers those topics that you're looking for that we don't already have that information on. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We do webinars on most Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursday webinars are generally like today's, sort of a high-level overview. Tuesdays are when we do some of the more in-depth best practices type of presentations. So I look forward to seeing you at one of those.